My husband let his mother move into our nursery until the DNA test came back. I found out my mother-in-law had moved into my nursery on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before my due date. While I was at a prenatal appointment, my husband couldn't be bothered to attend. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not the guest room. Not the office we barely used. The nursery. The room I had painted sage green myself, on my knees, 7 months pregnant. Because Marcus said he was too busy with work to pick up a paintbrush. Before I go further, I need you to understand something about the next 20 minutes. This isn't a story about a mean mother-in-law. Every family has one of those. This is a story about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you decide, quietly, without ever saying it out loud, that you don't actually belong in your own life. My name is Deja Coleman, 31 years old, 6 months into a marriage that everyone told me was a whirlwind. Marcus and I met at a work conference, married 4 months later, and I was pregnant by month 6. I know how that sounds. I knew how it sounded then too. But Marcus was attentive, generous, the kind of man who remembered how I took my coffee before I told him twice. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until I was very pregnant and very tired, was that Marcus had never actually left his mother's house. Not physically. Emotionally, he still lived there, and I had simply moved into the guest wing of a life that already belonged to someone else. Patricia, his mother, had opinions about everything from the day we got engaged. The venue was wrong. My dress was too modern. When I got pregnant, the opinions became instructions. I need you to eat more protein, Deja. I need you to stop working. So much stress isn't good for the baby. I let it slide because I told myself that's just what mothers do. They worry, they overstep, they mean well, even when it doesn't feel like it. I want you to remember that thought, because it's the thought that almost cost me everything. The Tuesday I came home from my appointment, I walked into the nursery to grab the paint swatches I'd left on the changing table, and found Patricia's suitcase open on the floor. Her robe hanging on the closet door, where my going-home outfit for the baby was supposed to hang. A framed photo of her and Marcus as a child sitting on the dresser. I had spent an entire Saturday assembling by myself. I stood in that doorway the same way I imagine anyone stands when the floor of their life quietly gives way. I didn't scream. I didn't cry yet. I just asked, very calmly, "Why is your mother's suitcase in my nursery?" Marcus wouldn't look at me. He said it was temporary, just until the baby came. Patricia had been having some health issues, he said, and it made sense for her to be close by, to help. Help with what? I asked. The baby isn't even here yet? He said something about how families support each other, how I was being dramatic, how the guest room technically shared a wall with construction noise from the unit next door, and this was just easier. I want to be completely honest with you. Some small, exhausted 7 months pregnant part of me almost let it go. That's how these things work. They don't ask you to accept everything at once. They ask you to accept one small, unreasonable thing, and then another, until the unreasonable becomes the architecture of your entire home. But something in me, some quiet, cold clarity that pregnancy sometimes gives you, refused to let this be the one thing I swallowed. That night, I didn't argue. I made dinner. I smiled through it, and I started paying attention in a way I hadn't let myself before. I noticed that Patricia had a key to our house that I had never given her. I noticed that mail addressed to her had started arriving at our address 2 months earlier, long before this suitcase ever appeared. I noticed that Marcus's tone changed completely whenever she called. Softer, more careful. The tone of a man managing someone rather than loving someone. 3 days later, I found the paperwork. Not hidden, just left on the kitchen counter the way things get left when someone assumes you'll never actually look. A residency application. Patricia was applying to be added to our homeowner's insurance as a permanent resident. Not a visitor. A resident. Effective the week our baby was due. I didn't confront him that night either. I called my sister Renee, a family law paralegal, who had spent a decade watching exactly this kind of quiet takeover happen to other women. She asked me one question that changed everything. She asked, Deja, whose name is actually on the deed, and I realized, sitting on my bathroom floor at 11 at night, that I didn't fully know the answer. Marcus had handled the closing. Marcus had handled the paperwork. I had signed things I trusted, because trust was supposed to be the whole point of marriage. The next morning, I pulled every document I could find. The deed, thankfully, listed both our names, a small mercy I hadn't earned so much as gotten lucky on. But something else caught my eye, tucked into a folder in his desk. Prenatal appointment records for a woman who was not me. Dated 8 months back, a woman named Ashley. And a paternity test request form, already filled out, already scheduled, for a due date that lined up almost exactly with mine. I sat very still for a long time. Then I did something I am not ashamed of. I called the clinic listed on the form, gave the reference number printed at the top, and asked, as calmly as I have ever asked anything in my life, whether the results were back yet. They were. The clinic couldn't legally tell me the specifics over the phone, but they confirmed a name on file. Marcus's name, as the requesting party. He had been quietly preparing for the possibility that he had a second child on the way, from someone else. At the exact same time, he let his mother move into the room meant for mine. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I called Renee back, and by the following week, I had a lawyer of my own. A locksmith scheduled for the day I knew Marcus and Patricia would both be out, and a plan that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with protecting myself and the child I was still carrying. The DNA test results, when they finally surfaced through the divorce discovery process 3 months later, confirmed what the clinic had already told me. Marcus was the father of Ashley's daughter, born 6 weeks before my son. 2 children, 2 mothers, 1 man who had spent 9 months managing both of us like accounts he could quietly rebalance whenever it suited him. Patricia never apologized. She said, more than once, that she had simply been trying to help her son through a difficult time, as if the difficult time hadn't been entirely of his own making. I didn't need her apology by then. I had already changed the locks, already removed her name from the insurance application before it was ever finalized, already moved forward with a custody and support agreement that made sure my son would never have to inherit the confusion his father built. There was a moment during the custody mediation, sitting across a conference table from Marcus and his attorney, where he tried one last time to make me the villain of his own story. He said I had overreacted to a simple family arrangement, that Patricia had only ever wanted to be close to her grandchild, that I had turned a misunderstanding into a courtroom. I let him finish speaking completely. Then, I calmly set the clinic reference printout on the table, along with the residency application dated the exact same week as the paternity test request, and I asked him calmly which part exactly I had misunderstood. He didn't have an answer for it. His attorney, notably, didn't have one either. The mediator moved us to the next item on the agenda without another word being said about it, and I remember feeling, for the first time in months, that the ground under me was finally solid again. My son was born 5 weeks later, in a nursery I repainted myself, in an apartment with exactly 1 name on the lease, mine. Marcus sees him every other weekend, supervised by an agreement, not by trust, because trust is something you earn back slowly, if at all. Patricia has never met her grandson. That was her choice, made the day she chose a suitcase over a conversation. If you are watching this and some quiet part of you is already making excuses for someone who has started rearranging your life without asking, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to ask whose name is actually on the paperwork. You are allowed to stop calling a takeover help just because it arrives with a smile. And when the truth finally comes back, however it comes back, you don't have to apologize for finally, calmly, taking your name off of everything that was never really shared to begin with.